You know, there's this famous optical illusion, right? The Penrose stairs.
Oh yeah, the one that looks like an impossible loop.
Exactly. It's a drawing of a staircase. It just keeps going up and up, like taking 4 90-degree turns in this continuous impossible loop.
Right. It messes with your head.
It really does. And it looks completely rational when you focus on just one individual step. I mean, the angles seem to make sense.
But then you zoom out.
Yeah, you zoom out and look at the entire architectural drawing, and you realize it's a paradox. It's an impossibility that's basically feeding on itself to create this illusion of infinite ascent.
And the people walking on it think they're climbing forever, but they're actually just, walking in a circle.
Exactly. It's mesmerizing because your brain desperately wants to believe the structure is sound.
Even though the physics absolutely do not add up once you take in the macro view.
Right. And we usually leave those kinds of impossible loops to, I don't know, art galleries and philosophy classes. Sure. But what if that exact same illusion, that perpetual self-feeding upward loop, is actually the foundational architecture for the current multi-trillion-dollar artificial intelligence boom?
Now that is a terrifying thought.
Right. What happens if we are building the future of the global economy on a staircase that isn't actually attached to the ground?
Well, that is the definition of a systemic blind spot. I mean, we are looking at a market structure that is structurally dizzying.
Yeah.
Where the demand for a product might be entirely manufactured by the people selling it.
Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we are going to unpack the hidden, almost invisible financial architecture driving AI.
It's a wild ride.
We're exploring something called the cloud credit circuit, and we're going to look at how it fundamentally dictates the reality of real AI investments.
And to do this, we are weaving together a stack of sources that at first glance might seem totally disconnected.
Yeah, we've got a highly critical tech policy article exposing a hidden accounting loop. We're looking at a massive January 2025 Federal Trade Commission staff report.
That's the one of big tech partnerships, right?
Yes, exactly. Plus, we'll look at a philosophical legal paper by Gilad Abiri on corporate AI constitutions.
Fascinating stuff.
And then we are going to throw all of that against the wall of reality by examining the unfolding, incredibly tense standoff between the AI giant Anthropic and the U.S. Department of Defense under the Trump administration.
Not to mention the recent 2026 reversal on AI chip exports to China.
Right. So we are connecting corporate accounting, military strategy, ethical philosophy, and the physical reality of global supply chains.
It's a massive web.
It really is. The central mystery we are investigating for you today is this. What if the astronomical, unstoppable demand for AI isn't entirely a pure technological revolution?
What if it's, at least in part, a masterpiece of financial engineering?
Exactly. And how does this opaque system impact your tax dollars, the actual science of algorithms, and ultimately national security?
It really challenges the core narrative we've all been sold.
I know.
Well, the narrative is that AI is an inevitable, organic tidal wave. But the sources suggest we might actually be pumping the water ourselves.
Wow. Okay, before we take that first step onto the staircase, I want to make our ground rules very clear to you, the listener.
Always a good idea.
Our sources today cover highly sensitive political actions, ongoing policies involving the current U.S. administration, the military, and some of the largest corporate entities on the planet.
Right.
In this deep dive, we are impartially reporting the facts and arguments precisely as they are laid out in the source material. We are not endorsing any political viewpoints.
Our only goal is to convey the ideas, the tensions, and the mechanical data contained in these original sources.
Exactly. So you can understand the hidden levers pulling the global economy.
We are here to map the territory, point out the fault lines, and just explain how the machinery works.
Okay, so we have to start with the money. Or, well, more accurately, the illusion of the money.
Let's talk about this cloud credit circuit.
Yeah. The tech policy source highlights a staggering figure. Microsoft committed $13 billion to OpenAI.
$13 billion. That's with a B.
Right. When you hear that, you picture wire transfers, massive cash infusions, like a giant war chest that OpenAI can spend however they want.
But the article points out a massive portion of this money never actually left Microsoft's balance sheet.
Hey, really?
Yeah. It flowed as credits for Microsoft's own Azure cloud infrastructure.
Okay, the mechanics of how this so-called investment actually materializes are profoundly circular.
Exactly. Let's break down the physical reality of this.
Please do.
Microsoft announces a massive multi-billion-dollar investment. The headlines go wild. But a vast majority of that value is delivered not in liquid cash, but in digital vouchers to use Microsoft's own servers.
Okay, I need to pause here because the word compute gets thrown around as a noun in these sources, and it sounds like jargon.
It does sound like jargon.
When we say OpenAI needs compute, we aren't talking about them buying a few MacBooks, right? We are talking about warehouse-sized buildings filled with thousands of ultra-advanced microchips requiring dedicated power plants to run.
Yes, compute is basically shorthand for computational power.
Got it.
To build a frontier model, which is the industry term for the most advanced, cutting-edge AI systems, like GPT-4 or Claude 3, you have to process trillions of pieces of data.
Which you can't just do on a laptop.
No, you absolutely cannot do that on a normal computer. You need tens of thousands of specialized processors running simultaneously for months.
So OpenAI holds this digital voucher for billions of dollars worth of time on Microsoft's massive supercomputers.
Exactly.
So it's essentially a giant gift card to the Microsoft store.
That is a perfect way to put it. Now, OpenAI redeems those credits. They spin up those thousands of servers on Microsoft Azure to train their new AI.
Okay, making sense so far.
But here is where the accounting mechanism kicks in. When OpenAI uses those pre-funded credits, Microsoft books that usage is cloud revenue.
Wait, hold on. Let me make sure I have this straight, because that sounds absurd.
It's wild, I know.
Microsoft gives OpenAI a voucher. OpenAI hands the exact same voucher back to Microsoft in exchange for server time.
Right.
And Microsoft records that voucher being handed back to them as new incoming revenue on their quarterly earnings report.
From an accounting perspective, yes.
You're kidding.
Microsoft Azure is providing a service, server time, and recognizing revenue for delivering that service.
So Wall Street analysts look at Microsoft's quarterly earnings and see their cloud business exploding with AI workloads.
Exactly. This incredible growth narrative boosts Microsoft's stock price and overall market valuation.
And what happens next?
That inflated valuation justifies the Microsoft board approving the next massive round of investment into OpenAI.
That is the Penrose stairs. That is the perpetual motion machine.
It really is.
But I have to ask, is that even legal? Because if I own a bakery and I give you a $100 gift card to my bakery and you come in and buy $100 worth of croissants, I can't go to the bank and say my business just generated $100 in fresh organic growth.
Right?
I mean, I paid myself.
It is a highly aggressive maneuver, but it generally falls within the bounds of generally accepted accounting principles, or GAAP.
Really?
Because the compute power being utilized is physical and real. The servers exist, the electricity is being burned, the models are actually being trained.
Okay, so the loophole is what exactly?
The loophole is that these are technically two separate corporate entities doing business with each other. Microsoft isn't technically paying itself, it's paying a company it heavily invested in, which then buys services from Microsoft.
Wow. And the sources show this is an industry-wide structural pattern, not just a Microsoft quirk.
Oh, absolutely not. Amazon invested $8 billion into Anthropic under a similar structure.
And Google did the same with Anthropic, right?
Yeah, they're all doing it. And it's not just the software and cloud guys.
Huh?
The hardware companies are in on it too.
Wait, the physical chip makers?
Yeah. NVIDIA, the company making the physical chips, profits from selling those chips to AI infrastructure startups like CoreWeave.
Okay.
Then NVIDIA takes those profits and invests them directly back into CoreWeave.
Maybe guess. CoreWeave then uses that investment money to buy more NVIDIA chips.
You got it, which flows right back onto NVIDIA's income statement as revenue.
That is insane. It is a self-reinforcing loop at every single layer of the hardware and software stack.
It is.
I've got an analogy for this. Imagine you walk into a casino.
Okay, I'm with you.
The casino owner comes up to you and says, "Hey, here is $10,000 in casino chips on the house."
A good night so far.
Right. You take the chips, you go to the roulette table, and you proceed to lose all $10,000 to the house over the next hour.
A normal night at the casino.
Yeah, exactly. At the end of the night, the casino owner goes to their investors and says, "Great news. We just generated $10,000 in brand new gaming revenue from this guy."
Yeah, that's exactly the dynamic.
If they are essentially paying themselves to generate these metrics, is this money real? Or is this monopoly money being used to inflate a massive bubble?
That is the core debate in the financial sector right now. Is it monopoly money?
Right, because the physical output is real, the AI models do get built.
Exactly. But the financial signal is distorted. Think about the strategic imperative for a company like Amazon or Microsoft. By structuring the deal this way, they achieve three massive goals.
What are they?
First, they secure exclusive infrastructure access to the most important AI startups in the world.
Makes sense.
Second, It inflates their own cloud growth metrics, driving their stock.
Win-win for them.
And third, it functionally forecloses competition. If Anthropic is contractually bound to spend billions of Amazon's credits on AWS servers, they aren't going to go shopping around at independent data centers.
I see the logic from the corporate side. It's a brilliant way to lock down the market while making your stock chart go up and to the right.
Absolutely.
But if I'm zooming out, it creates a fog. If a startup's consumption of cloud resources isn't entirely pre-funded by the cloud provider itself, how can anyone tell what the actual organic market demand for AI is?
You can't. It becomes incredibly difficult to separate genuine market demand from financially engineered demand.
And this is where the story leaves Wall Street and directly impacts the listener.
Yeah. Why should someone listening to this deep dive care about the intricacies of cloud accounting? Because the illusion of demand generated by this circuit is spilling over into public policy and the physical environment.
Right. Our governments are making historical, generation-defining investments based on the assumption that this demand is entirely real.
We're talking about the SHIED-PS Act, which is funneling tens of billions of public taxpayer dollars into semiconductor manufacturing.
And the sources mention the proposed Stargate project, which is a staggering $500 billion infrastructure initiative to build domestic supercomputers.
$500 billion.
What does $500 billion of infrastructure even look like mechanically?
It looks like entire regions of the country being terraformed to support data centers.
Terraformed, like physically altering the landscape.
Yeah. It's pouring millions of tons of concrete, building dedicated electrical substations, routing thousands of miles of fiber optic cables, and securing massive water rights for cooling systems.
Wow.
These monumental public investments are predicated on a specific narrative, that the skyrocketing demand for compute reflects a genuine, organic, insatiable technological need from the broader economy.
But if a huge chunk of that demand is just Amazon paying Anthropic to pay Amazon, then the foundation of that narrative is really shaky.
Exactly.
Are we evaluating whether public subsidies are based on a technological reality or a financially manufactured demand?
The tech policy analysis argues that these mechanisms severely distort the real perception of the market.
Which is terrifying when you think about the scale of the money involved.
If policymakers are committing public funds to infrastructure that will lock in physical assets and energy commitments for decades, they must understand that the demand signals they are relying on are partly artifacts of a financial structure.
So we're building these massive facilities based on a loop, but what about the actual science?
What do you mean?
Well, if I'm an AI researcher, I just want to build the smartest, most efficient model possible. How does this financial loop alter the pursuit of actual algorithmic efficiency?
That is a crucial question. In a normal, resource-constrained environment, if you want to build a better software program, you focus on efficiency.
Right. You write cleaner code.
You optimize your algorithm, you figure out how to get more output from fewer inputs, because compute time is incredibly expensive.
Necessity is the mother of invention. If I only have a laptop, I have to be really clever about how my code runs.
Exactly. But the U.S. cloud credit circuit actively disincentivizes efficiency.
Wait, really?
The goal of the cloud provider is to demonstrate massive, continuously growing usage of their cloud infrastructure to satisfy Wall Street.
Oh, I see where this is going.
If OpenAI suddenly figured out how to train a model using only 10% of the compute power they used previously, Microsoft's Azure revenue growth from that partnership would plummet.
Oh, wow. If the AI gets too efficient, the cloud bubble deflates. The house loses its revenue stream.
Subsidizing this heavily capital-intensive loop essentially tells these AI labs, don't worry about efficiency. We have pre-funded billions of dollars of compute for you. Just use brute force.
Throw as much raw data and as many servers at the problem as possible.
Exactly. It rewards scale over elegance. And the sources provide a striking real-world example of this risk with the DeepSeek model.
DeepSeek, right. That's a Chinese AI initiative. What did they do?
They proved that highly competitive, frontier-level AI capabilities can be achieved with dramatically less compute power than the American models are using.
Seriously?
Yeah. They achieved near parity with a fraction of the hardware.
Because they had to. They don't have this infinite cloud credit loop artificially insulating them from costs.
Right, they were forced to be clever.
They used a scalpel while we are using a sledgehammer.
That's a great analogy. And the profound risk highlighted here is that by focusing on financially engineering the appearance of massive demand, the U.S. might actually be leaving itself at a long-term technological disadvantage, despite spending exponentially more money.
That is wild. We are subsidizing a system that makes our own technology structurally bloated.
Exactly.
Let's ground this again for the listener because the physical impact of this bloat is immense. Your tax dollars are funding the physical assets of this industry.
And it goes beyond federal
Yeah,
taxes.
furthermore, local governments, city councils, state utilities, they are locking into decade-long power purchase agreements to supply electricity to massive new data centers.
And they are doing this based on these inflated demand signals.
Right. If the demand is an illusion, everyday citizens are taking on incredible long-term infrastructural risk for a market that might not actually exist at the scale being projected.
Which brings us to the regulatory oversight.
Right.
You would expect government watchdogs to be scrutinizing this.
You really would.
The Federal Trade Commission released a massive staff report in January 2025, specifically looking at these AI partnerships.
Yeah, the FTC did their homework on the structural components. They investigated the Microsoft, Amazon, and Alphabet deals.
And they identified major classic competitive concerns.
Big tech isn't just providing compute, they are getting equity, revenue sharing rights, and unprecedented access to sensitive data.
Let's look at the mechanics of that access. The FTC warned about big tech peering into confidential chip, co-design details, and partner financial data.
That sounds like a massive conflict of interest.
It is. Imagine a scenario where a senior engineer at a cloud provider who is simultaneously building their own in-house AI models has granular visibility into exactly how an independent AI startup is utilizing their servers.
Like seeing what their memory constraints are and how their data pipelines flow.
Exactly. It is a massive informational advantage.
And the FTC also warned heavily about lock-in.
Yes, the concept of data gravity.
Data gravity.
Basically, once an AI startup builds its architecture on a specific cloud provider using billions in credits, rewriting their fundamental code base to work on a competitor's proprietary systems becomes nearly impossible.
Let alone physically migrating petabytes of training data.
Right. It becomes financially and technically ruinous. The switching costs are astronomically high.
Okay, so the FTC looked at this through the traditional lens of antitrust. Like, are these giant tech firms leveraging their dominance to squeeze out competitors?
Yes.
But when you read the tech policy critique alongside the FTC report, you realize the FTC completely missed the macro point.
Their analytical framework was just too narrow. They focus entirely on classic monopoly behavior, who controls the layers of the tech stack.
But they ignored what this cloud credit circuit actually produces.
Exactly.
They missed the manufacturer demand signal. They looked at how the gears fit together, but they didn't ask if the machine was just spinning in a circle to create an illusion.
And the risk here isn't just about unfair competition. It's about systemic collapse.
Systemic collapse. The sources use a phrase that immediately makes me think of the 2008 financial crisis. They say we have created an ecosystem that is too entangled to fail.
The macroeconomic danger is profound. Let's look at this like a massive Jenga tower where all the blocks have been secretly glued together.
Okay.
Each actor in this circuit is pursuing a strategy that makes sense for them.
Yeah.
But in the aggregate, they have woven a dense web of cross-equity stakes and exclusive contracts.
Walk me through the domino effect. If I pull one block out of this glued Jenga tower, what actually happens?
Let's run a hypothetical stress scenario. Say a massive AI startup hits a wall. Consumer adoption slows down and they stop burning through as much compute.
Okay, so their usage drops.
Suddenly, their partner cloud provider loses a core, massive revenue driver. That missing revenue spooks Wall Street. The cloud provider's stock price, which has been buoyed entirely by the AI narrative, tanks.
And these cloud providers are bedrock stocks. They anchor global index funds, 401ks, pension plans.
Exactly. A localized failure in an AI lab quickly transmits into a massive hit to global retirement portfolios.
That is terrifying.
And conversely, if a cloud provider decides they need to financially pull back and stop issuing credits, the AI startup's compute supply is immediately severed, and their business grinds to a halt.
So the interconnections are so deep that no single node can be safely unwound without risking the destabilization of the entire ecosystem.
The financial products are different than 2008, but the systemic fragility feels identical.
So how do Congress and regulators address opaque financial structures moving faster than oversight? The sources actually lay out 3 concrete interventions.
Yes, let's break down the mechanics of these solutions. The first involves the SEC, the Securities and Exchange Commission.
Okay, what's the plan there?
The proposal is forced transparency. Currently, cloud providers record a massive aggregate number for cloud revenue.
They just lump it all together.
Right. The SEC should mandate that they publicly disaggregate that revenue. They need to explicitly show the percentage that originates from companies in which they hold equity, debt, or convertible instruments.
Wait, define a convertible instrument for me.
A convertible instrument is usually a type of loan or debt that a company issues, which can later be converted into equity or stock in that company under certain conditions.
So it's like a loan that can become ownership.
Exactly. It's a way to invest money now and decide later if you want to be a creditor or an owner. If a cloud provider holds these in an AI startup, they have a massive vested financial interest in that startup's valuation.
So the SEC would force Microsoft to say, we made $30 billion in Azure revenue, and explicitly $10 billion of that came from companies we own a piece of.
Precisely. That shines a light right into the black box.
The second solution is about public money, specifically targeting the Department of Commerce, right?
Yes. The U.S. government is handing out billions through the CHPS Act. The proposal is to condition these public subsidies on independent demand validation.
Meaning the government shouldn't just take the tech company's word for it when they ask for subsidy money to build more factories?
Exactly. The source compares this to the National Environmental Policy Act, NEPA.
Oh, like environmental impact studies.
Right. Under NEPA, before you build a federally funded highway, you must independently assess the environmental impact. The argument is that before we pour public funds into AI infrastructure, we need independent auditors to verify that the projected compute demand isn't just an artifact of the self-referential cloud credit circuit.
That makes total sense, but how would you even audit that? How do you validate an invisible digital demand?
You would have auditors trace the actual end-user utilization of the AI models?
Like, who is actually querying the AI?
Exactly. Are paying consumers and distinct enterprise businesses actually using the tool enough to justify the server load? Or is the server load just the startup training a slightly larger model, using free credits to hit a benchmark for their next funding round?
That is brilliant. Measure twice, cut once.
Exactly.
And the third solution targets that too entangled to fail Jenga tower. This involves the Financial Stability Oversight Council, the FSOC.
Yes. The FSOC was created specifically after the 2008 crisis to identify systemic risks outside the traditional banking sector.
Because in 2008, insurance companies deeply entangled in housing were the ones that triggered the freeze.
Right. The argument is the FSOC must treat AI infrastructure with that same urgency. They need to aggressively stress test these cross-sectoral entanglements.
They need to run simulations like what happens to the broader economy if NVIDIA chip sales drop 30%.
Or what happens if Anthropic goes to zero tomorrow? Who goes bankrupt next?
To synthesize this simply for the listener, without these common sense regulations, everyday citizens bear the risks.
We all bear the risk.
You bear the financial risk through tax dollars subsidizing factories, the infrastructural risk through local power grids being maxed out, and the systemic risk in your retirement accounts.
Meanwhile, corporations reap the astronomical valuation rewards created by a market they themselves engineered.
Okay, so we've established that we have these massive, financially insulated, deeply entangled AI giants. And if these companies are financially fragile and desperate to keep this cloud loop going to reach their IPOs...
What happens when someone with infinite leverage comes knocking?
Exactly. What happens when this concentrated corporate power collides directly with the absolute hard power of the United States military?
This brings us to the unfolding drama between Anthropic and the U.S. Department of Defense.
It's quite a story.
To understand this conflict, we have to start with Anthropic's constitution.
Now, we're used to software having a terms of service agreement. You scroll to the bottom, click I agree, and move on.
Usually without reading a single word.
Exactly. It just says you won't use the software to do illegal things.
Yeah.
But Anthropic, which makes the Claude AI model, did something totally different.
They really did.
The sources feature a paper by Gilad Abiri examining Anthropic's 79-page AI constitution, published in 2026.
Abiri's analysis points out that this document is not boilerplate risk mitigation. It is an extended philosophical explanation of why the AI should behave in certain ways.
Right. It dictates the AI's values.
It operates on a principal hierarchy, where Anthropic's internal instructions override the operator's commands.
The most fascinating part is that it instructs the AI to be a conscientious objector.
Yes.
It explicitly tells the algorithm that just like a human soldier might refuse an unlawful order, the AI should refuse to assist with actions that would help concentrate power in illegitimate ways.
It's like trying to teach a calculator to have a soul.
But whose soul is it? Whose moral framework is being coded into this machine?
This is what Iberi calls the political community deficit.
The political community deficit. What does that mean exactly?
It's the absence of any democratic body with the authority to determine the principles that govern AI behavior. Anthropic has written the constitution for an entity that operates globally, but the values were decided unilaterally by a small team of executives and engineers in San Francisco.
And the kicker is they know what a democratic process would look like, and they actively chose to ignore it.
That's the most striking part of the paper.
The sources detail an experiment Anthropic ran in 2023 with a collective intelligence project. How did that work mechanically?
They gathered a demographically representative sample of 1,000 Americans and had them democratically draft a public constitution for an AI.
Okay.
They then trained a model on that public constitution and compared it to a model trained on their internal corporate constitution.
What were the results? Like, were they really that different?
Extremely different.
Yeah.
The democratically sourced rules diverged by 50% from Anthropic's internal rules.
50%.
The public prioritized objectivity and accessibility much more heavily. And crucially, the model trained on the public rules actually showed lower bias while maintaining the exact same performance level.
Wow. They proved, scientifically, that democratically crowdsourcing AI ethics produces a measurably less biased model.
Yes, they did.
And then, when they published their official 79-page constitution, they completely ignored the public input.
The final document makes no reference to the democratic experiment. The company's answer to who decides is explicit. Anthropic decides.
So this private company is bypassing democratic institutions to unilaterally dictate the ethical constraints of a globally transformative technology.
Exactly. And this inherent tension is what lit the fuse for the current explosion with the Department of Defense.
Because the military doesn't exactly like being told what to do by a startup in San Francisco.
Definitely not. The Trump administration and the DoD came to Anthropic and demanded unrestricted access to Claude to use for, quote, all lawful purposes.
And Anthropic refused.
They drew two hard red lines based on their constitution. First, they refused to allow Claude to be used for the mass domestic surveillance of American citizens.
Okay, understandable. What was the second?
Second, they refused to allow their AI to be used in fully autonomous weapons systems, weapons that identify and fire on targets, without a human making the final decision.
And the DoD was not having it.
At all.
They argue that tying the military's hands with the corporate terms of service document during a technological arms race is simply unacceptable.
So the retaliation from the Trump administration was immediate and unprecedented.
They gave Anthropic a 3-day ultimatum, right?
Hand over the keys or face an existential threat. The administration threatened to officially label Anthropic a supply chain risk.
We need to explain the mechanics of that designation because it is a nuclear option in government contracting.
It really is. Historically, the supply chain risk designation is strictly reserved for foreign adversaries, companies like Huawei from China or Kaspersky Labs from Russia.
Applying this to an American company is unprecedented.
Completely unprecedented.
If I'm a developer at Boeing or Lockheed Martin and Anthropic gets slapped with this label, what happens the next morning? How does a quarantine actually work on a software level?
It creates an immediate, devastating purge. If an entity is designated a supply chain risk, anyone doing business with the DoD is functionally prohibited from having that entity's products anywhere in their systems.
Like zero tolerance.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
A developer at Lockheed Martin would literally have to comb through their coding environments, their data analysis pipelines, and their server clusters to rip out any API integration or code base associated with Claude.
Wow.
They have to prove to the government that their digital environment is completely sterilized of Anthropic products before they can bid on a contract.
And the timing is brutal. Anthropic is preparing for a highly anticipated initial public offering and IPO.
Right, which is a massive milestone.
For the listener, an IPO is when a private company first sells shares to the public, and it requires showing investors a flawless narrative of growth and stability. We are talking about a company with a massive $14 billion revenue run rate.
Let's define that too.
Yeah, a revenue run rate basically means taking their current monthly revenue and projecting it out for a full year to show how big they are.
Slapping them with a supply chain risk label right before an IPO is a torpedo to the hull. It creates massive market panic.
It is a use of absolute government power to force compliance.
But there is a massive logical contradiction in the administration's approach here.
Oh, right.
While threatening to label them a security risk that must be purged, the administration simultaneously threatened to use the Defense Production Act, or the DPA, to essentially nationalize Anthropic's model.
I really need you to explain this paradox. How can the government say your technology is a toxic security risk and must be banned, while simultaneously saying your technology is so essential to national security that we are going to use federal emergency law to commandeer it?
It makes zero sense on the surface.
Analytically, it is a glaring contradiction.
Well, the Defense Production Act is a Cold War-era law that allows the president to force private industries to prioritize government contracts for national defense.
Right, like forcing car companies to build ventilators during the pandemic.
Exactly. In a physical sense, that's what it looks like. In a digital sense, invoking the DPA against an AI company would theoretically mean federal agents compelling Anthropic's engineers to strip the safety guardrails off their model and hand over the raw, unrestricted code to the Pentagon.
They can't be a toxic risk and a vital asset at the same time.
No, they can't. The only way to understand this contradiction is to view it as a pure aggressive negotiating tactic.
A shakedown.
Essentially, yes. The administration is utilizing every lever of state power to force a specific outcome. And this connects directly back to the financial loop we discussed earlier.
How so?
The government can exert this level of pressure precisely because of the financial vulnerabilities inherent in the AI industry. They know Anthropic relies on immense revenue streams and an upcoming IPO to sustain their position in the capital-intensive cloud credit circuit.
So by threatening the IPO, the government is weaponizing Anthropic's financial structure against its moral constitution.
That's exactly what they're doing.
The financial loop isn't just inflating demand, it's creating a vulnerability that the government can exploit to bypass the company's ethical guardrails. They are squeezing them on the balance sheet to break their conscience.
And history offers little reason to believe that voluntary corporate ethics survive contact with existential financial pressure.
Sad but true. And meanwhile, as this incredible standoff is happening domestically, all of this financial and ethical posturing relies on one simple fact. You need physical metal to build the machines.
Exactly. The global landscape is shifting beneath their feet.
None of the cloud credits, public subsidies, or corporate constitutions matter if you don't have the hardware.
We must transition from the ethereal world of software down to the fundamental reality of metallurgy and geopolitics.
Let's do it.
The Bloomsbury Intelligence and Security Institute report details a paradigm-shifting policy reversal by the Trump administration in January 2026 regarding China.
For years, the U.S. policy was strict containment. The U.S. said, we are not letting our most advanced AI chips, particularly NVIDIA's GPUs, near China.
But in January 2026, the administration completely reversed course.
They lifted the blanket ban. They allowed the export of NVIDIA's incredibly powerful H200 AI chips to China.
Now, they did impose strict conditions to manage the flow.
Yeah.
A 25% tariff, a 50% volume cap on shipments, and mandatory U.S. testing of the chips before export.
But the door was opened.
Yes, the door was open.
Why reverse it? Why hand over the keys to the most advanced computational engines to a geopolitical rival?
Well, the sources argue the previous restrictions were actually counterproductive. They were forcing China to innovate on their own.
Which is exactly what we didn't want them to do.
Exactly. China's domestic champion, Huawei, is producing chips that are only 60 to 70% as capable as the H200, but they are learning rapidly.
So the administration decided it's better to have China reliant on U.S. infrastructure, where the U.S. can monitor the flow, than to force complete, opaque self-sufficiency.
That's the political rationale, yes. But there's a much harder physical reason for this policy reversal.
Let me guess. China retaliated.
Yes. While the U.S. controls the intellectual property of the chips, China controls the dirt.
The dirt.
They control the critical minerals required to physically manufacture those chips. In response to U.S. tech restrictions, China began tightening export controls on essential materials.
The numbers in the report are staggering. China refines 70% of the world's silver used in semiconductor manufacturing. 70%.
It's a massive monopoly.
How is silver actually used in a microchip?
Silver is an incredibly efficient conductor of electricity. It is used in the specialized solder paste that attach the microchips to the circuit boards, and it's used in the intricate electrical pathways within the packaging of the chip itself to ensure rapid data transmission without overheating.
You cannot build a modern AI data center without metric tons of highly refined silver.
You absolutely can't. Furthermore, China absolutely dominates the processing of rare earth elements like gallium, which is crucial for advanced chip architecture.
Right.
And late last year, China escalated to outright export bans of these materials to the U.S.
This is the crux of the mutual dependency. The U.S. has the software and the chip designs. China has the physical elements required to build them.
China's restriction on these mineral exports threatened to physically halt the production lines of companies like NVIDIA.
So the U.S. policy reversal on the H200 chips was a direct concession forced by this mineral choke point.
It perfectly illustrates the fragility of the entire system. And the political fallout is chaotic. Congress is frantically trying to regain control. The House of Representatives passed the AI Overwatch Act.
What are the mechanics of that act?
It attempts to wrest control of chip exports away from the executive branch. It requires any shipment of advanced AI chips to receive explicit approval from both the House Foreign Affairs Committee and the Senate Banking Committee within a 30-day window before the cargo ships can leave the port.
Wait, so every single batch of NVIDIA ships going overseas would need a sign-off from 2 divided congressional committees within a month?
Yes.
A shipping container would literally sit at a dock waiting for a congressional vote. That creates massive, permanent uncertainty for global supply chains. You cannot plan multi-billion-dollar manufacturing cycles when a license could be arbitrarily revoked by the legislature at any moment.
It's completely unworkable. And the ultimate irony of all of this, the U.S. administration takes the political hit to reverse the ban, opens the door to sell the chips to secure the silver supply, and what does China do?
Don't tell me they didn't even want them.
According to the BC report, China instructed its customs authorities to block the import of the H200 chips anyway.
They rejected the concession.
They did. It suggests China is balancing its need for advanced computing against the long-term strategic risk of remaining dependent on U.S. technology.
Technology they know the U.S. will weaponize again in the future.
Exactly. We are firmly in a highly transactional era defined by mutual choke points. Both sides hold a gun to the other's supply chain.
Man, let's take a breath and recap the massive journey we've been on today.
We covered a lot of ground.
We started deep in the murky accounting ledgers of the cloud credit circuit, uncovering how the biggest tech companies are pre-funding their own revenue to artificially inflate market demand.
We saw how that financially engineered demand distorts reality, stifling true algorithmic efficiency by rewarding brute force computing over elegant code.
And ultimately risking hundreds of billions of taxpayer dollars on infrastructure we might not actually need.
Then we witnessed a historic standoff. An AI giant attempted to enforce a corporate conscience, refusing to build mass surveillance tools or autonomous weapons, only to collide with the absolute power of the U.S. military.
A military which weaponized the company's financial fragility to try and force compliance.
And finally, we pulled back to the global stage, revealing that all of these domestic dramas, the financial loops and the ethical standoffs, are tethered to the harsh physical reality of global supply chains.
The ambition of American AI is entirely dependent on the refinement of Chinese silver and gallium.
It's all connected.
As we wrap up, I want to leave you, the listener, with a final provocative thought based on everything we've unpacked today.
Think about the profound duality of trust we are currently accepting. On one hand, we are implicitly trusting these private tech giants to independently build the moral and ethical frameworks that will govern the future of warfare and intelligence,
bypassing the democratic process entirely.
Yet, simultaneously, we are blindly trusting those exact same companies' opaque financial ledgers to justify the expenditure of hundreds of billions of dollars in public infrastructure and subsidies.
We are outsourcing both our national conscience and our national budget to the same deeply conflicted corporate actors.
It really is something.
It brings us right back to the Penrose stairs. We're marching upward, building this massive AI economy, but the structure beneath us is a dizzying mix of circular finance, outsourced ethics, and brittle global supply lines.
We think we're climbing forever.
But are we? As AI becomes fully integrated into every single layer of our economy, our defense, and our daily lives, we have to ask ourselves, are we actually governing this technology, or are we simply walking in circles, becoming another node in its financial circuit?
A question we'll be dealing with for a long time.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive.